In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Please be seated. Good morning, everyone. You bravers of the cold. We are a pretty sorry lot here in Florida, aren't we? We complain about some cold. We really do hold, though, all those folks in harm's way. Yesterday, today, there are a lot of folks, again, devastated by these storms pressing across the eastern part of the country into the New England states. Really concerned about a lot of those folks being flooded out again. Really, it's been a tough couple of years for those folks up there, and so I just encourage you to keep all of them in your prayers. Today we are in the fourth chapter of Luke, as it relates to the gospel, and I really would like to just think about the gospel with you for a few minutes this morning. When I read this gospel last week, I was right back in, for the first time, preaching in my home church in Palatka. It was I think I was a midler. It was my midler year in seminary that I came home for the summer to do some work at our camp and conference center, and they invited me to come over to Palatka to preach one Sunday morning, and it was not easy. It's not easy because it's just hard to go home in a different way. Because before I went back, I was little Ricky. You know, you're sort of running around Palatka, and they remember you a certain way, right? They all remember you a certain way, and the sermon really was pretty bad. Carol and I still talk about it and laugh about it to this day. She can tell you about it. It was pretty bad. They didn't care. I mean, it was just, all they could say were things like, that was just, you're so cute. Exactly. And so I remember thinking to myself, okay, here I am in seminary. I'm going to be ordained a priest in about a year and a half, and I'm getting cute. This is it. This is all I'm going to get. But it really is hard for those folks to see you in a different way. I mean, it's hard to go home and be seen in a different way. And that's really what's going on in the gospel this morning. Jesus is trying to go, he is home. He's so thankful for that community of faith, that little synagogue in Nazareth. It has helped to shape and form his life. I mean, he's truly thankful. And he's just been baptized. He's been driven out into the wilderness where he was tempted by the devil for 40 days, and he's really now ready to begin his public ministry. And so he thinks it a good idea to go back home, maybe, and begin by making this as sort of a coming out party, to make this announcement that this reading, by the way, that he'd heard before he would ever really understand how his life would be related to this text from Isaiah. Those people were sharing that story with him over the years and the decades of his life. He learned about these words from Isaiah this morning from them. This is the gift of community. This is the gift of community. And yet, on this particular day, he stands up and he reads this part of the text from Isaiah. Then he goes and sits down, and then he says it. These words I just read, these words from Isaiah that you're all so familiar with, these words have now been fulfilled in your hearing. In other words, he is the fulfillment. His life, his ministry, his words, his preaching, his healing, his teaching, his healing words, all of this is held by these words from Isaiah. His life is the manifestation of these words. That's where we are in the season of Epiphany. God in this extraordinary human being made manifest. And here another moment. These words are fulfilled in your hearing. I'm the one. It's not easy for these folks to hear this. There's a suggestion here that there's amazement, a bit of amazement, but not long after this, they're running him out of town. Running him out of town. It just doesn't. They're not quite ready to see him or receive him that way. It took me back to one of my favorite, I think one of the most significant classes for me in seminary was a class on systems theory. And it's where I was challenged to get in touch with my life, all that had shaped and formed my life, my thinking, and the way that oftentimes the way I think and the way I engage the world. And so this class invited me to go back to my family of origin and even generations before that, and wonder how that experience with them and among those folks, given the way that they engage the world and the way they think and the way they talk and answer all kinds of difficult questions in life, I realized that I was very much shaped and formed by that. And I was able to get in touch with the good in that, but it was also, I think, most helpful because I was able to get in touch with the bad in that. I was really struggling with a lot of that at that time in my life. I was really struggling with it. And so that class really helped me to get in touch with the good and the bad of the community that shaped and formed my life. There was this Edwin Friedman, a book that he talks about this concept of differentiation, and this was a real gift to me at that time, because I began to understand that as much as I wanted to and cherished community, my family of origin, as much as I celebrated that and cherished it, it was okay for me to begin to stand apart from it, to distinguish myself from it. It was okay for me to be different, to celebrate the ways that it had shaped and formed my life, the things that I was thankful for, but also to get in touch with what had been painful for me and difficult in my life. And so this was an extraordinary time for me in my own sort of maturation, this process of awakening during this time in seminary. It really has continued to contribute to my life in ministry. But Jesus is very much in this place this morning. These are the same folks that have held him and encouraged him and laughed with his family, his parents, for years. These are the folks who opened the scriptures to him. These are the folks who first read these words from Isaiah to him years ago, over the years, many times. He's thankful for all of that, and yet it's time for him to come out in a new way, a different way. Today he says, these words are fulfilled in your hearing. I am the Messiah of God. Really difficult to grab hold of that. And in fact, they even sort of push him away. And I began to think about that, how we do that in our own lives. Community, our sense of community, we can find life, can't we? We can find life at its best. A place where we can feel safe, where we have a sense of belonging, where we encourage and hold each other. But we also can be guilty of not allowing each one of us to feel safe and be given permission to individualize a bit, to be different, to stand apart, to be given permission to be thankful and feel connected to community, but also to have my own unique perspective and understanding about life and how to engage life, or how to communicate my faith onto the world. Sometimes we're guilty of holding folks in a place where I'm comfortable, where we may be comfortable, but where the stranger or the visitor or the one that God has entrusted to us is not so comfortable. And in this moment, I wonder if we aren't also guilty of running people off. Running people off instead of looking for ways to try to encourage people and affirm people in their being so different. Jesus did the same thing. Look at what he said to the Syrophoenician woman. He did the same thing. You know, I love that story. But the Syrophoenician woman comes up and wants his help. And he represents the party line. He represents the tribal line. I wasn't sent to you. I was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, right? That's what he says. In that moment, he's just part of the crowd. In that moment, he's the tribe. And she doesn't fit. Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. And in that moment, you see, I think she continues to contribute to his differentiation, his standing apart, his representing something new and different that the community needs to hear, that the community needs to get in touch with. In fact, his words this morning from Isaiah, these are the words that define the activity of God. These words define the work of God. And that's why these words should define our common life here at Christ Church. And if these words define our common life, then this will become a safe place for people to come and struggle openly and honestly about who they are or what they're struggling with. They're trying desperately to find their own place, whether it's in the world or maybe even in the life of our church, trying desperately to be what God intended them to bring to our community, this unique gift that they could bring to us. And that's what that letter, that's what you find in 1 Corinthians today, is Paul's encouraging the community in Corinth, the church in Corinth, to not be afraid of the different, to not think that some of us are greater than others, but to really value each one and every gift, and helping us to see that when we can hold those gifts together in all of their wonder and diversity, we are more. We are greater. Our conversation is more significant. It is transformative at that point. What I found myself thinking a lot about this week is how I have held people in places that I wish I had not. Maybe as the church today, we get in touch with these words again. The Spirit of the Lord is upon us because He has anointed us to bring good news to those who are beaten down and downtrodden, those who are wearied by life. He has sent us to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, those who are struggling with seeing the world in a new way, of finding hope in a new day. He has sent us to set the oppressed free. That's the charge on my life and yours. Our tendency is to hold people in the same old places and to be judgmental and exclusive. This text reminds us that as the body of Christ, we're called to model something different, something extraordinary, something that has the power to change us when we get in touch with God's work and God's activity, and that becomes our purpose. That becomes my purpose in life. The sky is no longer the limit. We truly become spiritual beings connected with an eternal hope and an eternal message. Don't settle for anything less than that. Amen.